we'll get right to it. My name is Hadley Bajramovic. I'm the owner of the law firm, Immigration Law Offices of Hadley Bajramovic. We're located in Riverside. And I've had the honor of coming out to Chaffey for, I think it's been over about 10 years. And I've been coming out here and working with students, especially after DACA came to be a relief for college-age students. And because of our work with the Consulate of Mexico, Consulate of Guatemala, we also work really closely with Congressman Pete Aguilar, who is a great booster for this campus. Do you guys know Pete? Seen him around? No? Mm-hmm. Anytime you need help with a federal agency, you can call his office and he'll help you. Like, for example, a passport. You have a U.S. citizen passport that needs to be expedited, call Pete. So anyway, we are here today to talk about DACA, but we're more than happy to talk about any immigration matters, relief, because immigration is a big ball of wax in the law. We specialize in immigration because there's so much going on there that you really can't do anything but immigration and be, really good at it. So Mari works with our DACA department at our offices, and Raylene, you do some DACA work too, right? Yes. So they're here today to help answer questions where I might not know the answers. Okay, so DACA is in litigation right now. Are you guys DACAs? Anybody want to talk about being a DACA? That's okay if you're not. I'm just trying to make the perspective correct for the room. But we have a lot of people that are currently in DACA that were in DACA as of the time that Trump took on his administration, took over the USCIS and started this litigation. Well, the litigation actually started out in Texas with Judge Hainan. He's for immigration advocates, like our biggest enemy in the federal courts. So he started litigation stating that DACA took resources from the state of Texas, like to give driver's licenses to DACAs cost the state money. And so they've been fighting about this since, 2000 and, what year did Trump start? 17? Yes. So all of the DACAs who have DACA now all received DACA before that period, because the lawsuits put an injunction on the government filing initial DACAs. Actually, initial DACAs went on for a little bit longer. But as the suit progressed, the initial DACAs were no longer allowed to file. And let me see what more I put up here. The whole suit was kind of boiled down to whether or not the Obama administration follows some of the rules of creating an executive rule. Like, did they give the country notice that DACA was going to happen? It's an administrative act requirement that the government gives the country notice before starting any kind of a federal policy. And so that's what they're talking about here. They were seeking remedy for notice and comment requirements whenever they change a policy. Are you guys familiar with the Federal Register? The Federal Register is published by the federal government, I think, monthly. And it lists out all the changes that are going to happen in every agency. And so it's considered to be notice, like you receive notice for any kind of legal action because you have a right to know if somebody is going to sue you or taking action against you. And notice is super important in the United States. And the more I work with other governments and find out that there's no notice in many countries, I realize how important notice is. Well, that notice was what the Judge Hainan and the anti-DACA people attacked. They said the Obama administration did not give notice to the country that they were going to give this relief called DACA to 1 million people, and because they didn't have the right to comment about that, DACA program, that's why they said the program's invalid. So that's sort of a nuts and bolts discussion of what all of this is about. But currently, what's in place for DACA is that the people who have DACA prior to the Trump administration, and for the couple of years that they allowed initials, those people are the only ones that continue in DACA. There are no initials, no initial DACAs. And so that is causing a major problem right now for a group of people that are coming into age. And I'm seeing that in my office. And I'm seeing kids that aren't even qualified for DACA because they might have come in after the year 2007. You know, kids that are 15, 16 years old that have been here since 2008 that would normally be DACA age but aren't eligible even for DACA. So we have this whole new class of young people that are in school, in college, that don't have a right to work, they don't have any protections against deportation that Congress has to deal with now. And we're seeing some things happen, but I don't know if we have any hope just yet. The notice of intent to terminate is needed before the USCIS terminates DACA. That's about that notice requirement that I just kind of brushed over. But also, the reason why people who have DACA continue in DACA is because of a concept called promissory estoppel, or in regular terms, reliance. People who have DACA rely on it. They bought homes, they have jobs, they bought cars, they have credit card debt, all in reliance on having DACA. So that's the legal reason why DACA is still in place for people who were granted DACA. And in my opinion, despite the legal battles that are happening, and you can see on some of the DACA groups that DACA might go away, in my opinion, it can't go away because of those exact reasons. DACAs have homes, cars, debt. It will put a huge hole in our economy if DACA ends with no good solution. So this final rule that Mari has published here is telling what's in place for the DACA program right now. I've mentioned now several times that we can still renew DACA. It allows for advanced parole, no initials, and it's all going to stay that way until something changes, or something's decided. But the most important thing, and the reason why I'm glad that we're here today, is to talk about advanced parole. Because advanced parole is so important for somebody who has DACA, especially if they don't have a legal entry. So people, when we analyze a situation, usually the first question we ask anybody who's coming to me for advice is, did you enter legally or without inspection? Because that question sends me in a direction of what type of relief that person is eligible for. If somebody has entered the country with inspection and is undocumented but has an immediate relative, that person will get a green card eventually. For example, and this is happening now with DACAs, they're having children now that are turning 21. The program's been in place for 10 years. Maybe they were 30 when they received DACA. You could be 30 and under at that time. So now they're 40, early 40s, so they have children that are turning 21. If that DACA has a legal entry, then that DACA can file for an adjustment of status into a green card. Other scenario that's much more common, I just wanted to point out the scenario of having a child over 21 first, so I'm not forcing people into getting married. But if you have a legal entry, you're undocumented, and you have an immediate relative spouse who is a U.S. citizen, then you can file an adjustment of status into a green card. And the Obama administration knew that this was going to happen. And that's why they made advanced parole part of the DACA program, because the age group, you know, the people who are DACAs are in high schools with, in their whole social group. It was inevitable that DACAs were going to get married to U.S. citizens.
And just as an example, so for those of you who know me, Professor Zamora, my wife got brought over when she was like 3 months old. Like they put her in a suitcase. Like you've heard stories like that, right? So when we started dating, Trump just got into office, and my mother-in-law was like, "Gosh," she's like, "When are you gonna marry her?" Right? And so I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess that's the pressure." But they said that Hadley was actually our attorney for that. You've heard of penalties, like you gotta get sent back for a little bit, right? So advanced parole kind of restarts the clock. So what we did is we went in Tijuana with TJ. She went to the dentist, and then we crossed back. So the clock started then when we crossed the border, right? So from there, and we were already married. She got her residency and then her U.S. citizenship. So she just got her passport in the mail like 2 weeks ago.
I love that story.
So yeah, thank you again, ma'am. It works. It works.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm going to say our office has adjusted people, I'm going to say 300 times through that exact scenario. I'm trying to see if it's there yet. So we did lose advanced parole for like 2 years. The Trump administration ended it. As soon as Biden was elected, the USCIS just mysteriously put it back. I mean, even before Biden was sworn in. So we got advanced parole back about 4 weeks after the 2020 election. And from that point, it's been an education battle to make sure that DACAs know that advanced parole exists so that you can do exactly what Professor Zamora did. And Mari is our brainstormer who meets with our DACAs and comes up with the best reason to apply for advanced parole. Okay, yeah, we'll get back to this. So anyway, because advanced parole is so important that, you know, we really want you to go out and talk to your friends and your family about it and make sure that everybody knows it exists still for DACA. And that it is obtainable. We have, since we started filing advanced parole since 2020, we have not had one denial. So there are 3 reasons that you can apply for advanced parole on DACA. You can go for work. If your job has some work-related reason for you to go to another country, I didn't explain this, but advanced parole allows you to travel abroad and re-enter the United States without any issues. So the first reason you can travel is for school, like a work study. I'm sorry, I already said work. Work, school, humanitarian. So with the universities, Chaffey, and I'm sure there's some kind of program to go abroad, to visit other campuses abroad, to study abroad. If you go into that kind of a program, you can get advanced parole. It allows you to return after that study abroad. If you have a work-related reason, I'm trying to think of, we rarely have work-related reasons. We're actually sending 2 people from my staff to Mexico City, and we're requesting advanced parole for that for their work in my office, they need to go to Mexico City. Then the humanitarian reason, that is the most used reason for advanced parole. Humanitarian is a catch-all for anything that's considered in the good of humanity. And what the main good for humanity is dental work. So everybody knows that you can get dental services across the border, right? People go there to get their braces done, to get routine dental checks, to cleaning. It's much cheaper in Mexicali, Tijuana. We've worked so much with one dentist in Tijuana. The dentist's office goes to the border and picks up our clients and takes them to the dentist and then brings them back to the pedestrian line after the dentist is finished. The dentist in Mexico costs probably 90% less than the average dentist in the Inland Empire. So what we ask our clients to do is to go to a Inland Empire dentist and get a diagnosis and a quote. And the reason why dentists are always used is because a dentist can always find something wrong with your mouth. Okay? I mean, I have never been to the dentist where they're like, oh, you're perfect, you don't need anything done. They'll always find a hole or, you know, a root or something that needs to be fixed, and if I don't fix it, you know I'm going to die. So that's why we use the dentist, but there are other reasons, medical reasons to go. We've had people that have gone over for routine type operations. Can you give a few examples, Mari, since this is your ballpark?
So a couple of our clients have actually gone for braces. They've gone for tooth extractions, and it's way cheaper, like Hadley was saying. There was a process that cost like around $12,000 here in the US because she needed to get like the tooth extraction, braces, and so much more work done to help out with her treatment. And when we requested the quote in TJ, the amount totaled out to about almost $4,000, which is way cheaper than that. So a lot of different, it is like thousands of dollars cheaper, I'll say that. And we do get a lot of good outcome with that. All of our clients, when they come back, Hadley will mention later on, but they do come back very happy and with the experience that they experience.
We classify that as humanitarian because we were arguing that that person could not get that care for $12,000, but they could get the care with $4,000.
Because a lot of times they don't have health insurance, and we also use that and show them that they don't have health insurance here, so it does actually help out with their application.
So in the past 2 years, we've also had people who've had sick relatives, and that's always approved too. We've had people who needed to attend funerals, and sometimes the funerals have passed because, you know, the USCIS works very slowly. The approvals now come in about 4 to 6 months. So if we have a case with a sick relative or dying relative, we can get that expedited by making an appointment at the local USCIS field office, which is over in San Bernardino. So once we file for the advanced parole, then we can make an appointment at the local field office and we can get the advanced parole, an emergency advanced parole. So we've had to do that, I'm going to say a handful of times.
Yes.
So anyway, what Professor Zamora did was the dental route, and you know, as we've said, I'm going to say the majority of our cases have been dental. Wouldn't you say that, Maury? The majority of the have been dental. And once the advanced parole is approved, we receive a document. And the name of the document is the I-512L. But what it really is, it's a visa. And if you go online and research what I'm talking about today, which I'm sure you guys will, you're going to see a few people that put up warnings. This is not safe. There's no guarantee. You might not be able to come back. I heard about this person who went to Mexico and wasn't able to get back in. That doesn't happen. And I'm on so many different immigration lawyer groups and a member of AILA and all these different organizations. If that ever happened, I would know. Now, there are exceptions, of course. If somebody goes to Mexico with advanced parole to do dental work, but then tries to smuggle in 2 kilos of cocaine, yes, they're going to be blocked from entering the United States. They will not be allowed back in. So the exception is criminal activity, smuggling, transporting illegal substances. If somebody were to go out of the country and attempt to do any of those things, they would not be allowed to re-enter the U.S. Still, I haven't even heard of that. So the document that the DACA is given when they're approved for advanced parole is a very formal official document and is presented at the port of entry. When you return to the United States, it's stamped by Customs and Border Patrol, And that is your proof that you have a legal entry, and that is what you use if you have an immediate relative and you want to adjust status into a green card at any point later for the rest of your life. An immediate relative, I mentioned already, can be a child over 21 who's a U.S. citizen or a spouse who's a U.S. citizen. So I got off the PowerPoint, like always, and talked about advanced parole because that's our mission, to make sure everybody knows about advanced parole and that it's safe and it's a great way to travel. And people who have advanced parole and go to Mexico, for example, for dinner, sometimes jump on a plane and go see family members in other parts of Mexico, and that's perfectly fine. So, and what Mari was mentioning is people come back after they've gone to use their advanced parole and gone on a trip, and they're just overjoyed and so happy about the whole experience. And it's liberating for our DACAs. And also, allows for reunification of family. Anyway, we're going to go back to the PowerPoint. What we're talking about is renewing DACA and what's required for people who are renewing their DACAs on their own, which I think a lot of people are, because I think at this point people are on their 5th renewal. Because are they valid for 2 years? Because we went for a brief period when they were valid for 3 years, the DACA EAD and the DACA approvals. So the program started in August of 2012, so we're in 2023, so people are on their 5th renewal now. So the I-821D, sorry, that's the DACA application. The I-765 is the work authorization application. The I-765W is a worksheet where you tell the government why you need work authorization. And that's usually pretty easy. I need to work to survive. The G1145 is a very important form that gives you updates. It allows the government permission to text you to tell you when your DACA application has been received, or if it's been moved to a different service center, or when the work authorization or the DACA has been approved, you get an immediate response on any action that's taken by the USCIS if you file that form G1145. We've been seeing renewals 2 to 3 months, but we've even seen them like within a couple of weeks in some cases.
We actually did have a case that I filed, I would say mid-February, and we already got the approval this week. So it's just 2 weeks at least.
Yeah, I think they're just basically making sure there's no criminality and then they're approving them. Convictions, we're going to talk about that for a moment, right? There's part of the new final rule on DACA that's in place, allowing DACAs to move forward, is that a DACA cannot have a significant misdemeanor. And the one that's most problematic is the DUI. So if somebody has DACA, on their 4th renewal and then is pulled over driving intoxicated and gets a DUI, they can lose DACA. What we've been successful at doing, number one, is working with attorneys. So if somebody has an arrest and is going to court to fight DACA, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a criminal attorney to figure out solutions in court for people who have DUIs so that it does not affect their DACA. If there's no injury in the DUI, meaning nobody was hurt, there's no property damage, we can usually talk the DA's office into doing a plea deal for something called a wet reckless, which is not at the level of a DUI. It's a warning and it's a one-time shot. So if somebody gets the wet reckless and they stay, they follow all the classes and do everything they're supposed to do, then they should be fine moving forward. But if there's another DUI after the wet reckless, then there's nothing we can do after that. But there's also a process of expungement. Expungement legally means to seal a record. And when you're dealing with the federal government, expungements do not work normally. You cannot seal a record from the federal government. A lot of attorneys make money off of expungements and will tell people with immigration issues that they're fine, that they'll seal the record, but it's not true. The only people that are sealed from seeing a record with an expungement normally would be like an employer or non-government officials. But in DACA context, an expungement might help with a significant misdemeanor like a DUI. If you're able to expunge a DUI, the process of expungement itself means that the person convicted has proven to a judge that it was a one-time incident and there were no other criminal activity afterwards, and the judge was willing to seal the record. So that's why for DACA, specifically for significant misdemeanors, expungement might help to convince the USCIS it was a one-time thing and it's not a pattern of behavior with the person. So if the conviction has already happened, then expungement is our usual path to helping the DACA renew, notwithstanding the conviction. But we prefer to be involved at the criminal proceeding stage so we can work out a deal and make sure that the individual has a chance at a wet reckless. But I'm talking about DUIs because that's the crime that we have the most trouble with, but there are other crimes that are significant misdemeanors that can make a person ineligible for DACA. Anything that's involving theft or malicious intent, fraud, those are all significant misdemeanor crimes. I think one of the new developments in the DACA world is that when a person renews DACA, they're no longer able to write one check for $495. I know this seems ridiculous, but it's going to be problematic for people who've been renewing their DACA on their own. They've been writing a check to the government for $495. Well, recently, the government has decided they do not want one check, they want two checks. One for $85 and one for $410. The $85 is paying for biometrics service. Every time a DACA renews, there is a biometrics appointment where the applicant must go to an application support center and have their fingerprints scanned, and that's how the government knows whether or not there is any criminality. So that's what you're paying for in the $85 fee. The fee for $410 is for the work authorization. The DACA itself doesn't have a fee. Okay, so for a while we were recommending people who do not have DACA to go ahead and submit the DACA because there was a class action lawsuit being built for people who were not able to file DACA because of the Hanen lawsuit, because of the changes that were happening. But we don't see that going anywhere now. So we do not recommend that anybody try to file an initial DACA. But if there is any development in that, that will be all over the DACA advocacy, social media. We will be posting it on our social media. We'll give you our social media so you can follow it because we post about DACA constantly and all other types of immigration. There was something I wanted to say about that. What I'm seeing happening right now, which I think I'm the only person in my law firm that has any hope about this, is that they're proposing an in committee on a new DREAM Act. And it's the same actors, Lindsey Graham and Durbin. I don't remember his first name, if anybody knows it, shout it out. But it's bipartisan. The DREAM Act that failed in 2011 or 2010, I can't remember what year it was, everybody had their hopes on that act passing. And because it failed, we got DACA. Now they're trying again, and as I mentioned at the beginning, we have this whole new group of young people that aren't even eligible for DACA by the Obama DACA rules, that they came after 2007. And, you know, they're becoming a large part of our population. And then the renewals is tenuous. There are a lot of people who didn't file the initials on time or who didn't renew timely and fell out of DACA. So there's got to be a solution for all of these people that are out there that are still considered dreamers. And when I say dreamer, I mean somebody that came in as children that did not have the will to say, I don't want to go to the United States. That's what the DREAM Act is about. So there seems to be bipartisan support for protecting and giving rights to people that were brought here by their parents, is the bottom line. Okay, so I went over advanced parole in detail. If anybody would like to ask questions about that now, this will be a good time. Yes,
One
sir.
question, do they have to go back to their country of origin,
No.
or can they do it?
No, I mean, we've done quite a few, for example, study abroad. I remember one that we did for Cal State, San Bernardino, and it was the young man was from Mexico, but he went to South Korea.
Okay.
So, and you know, it's just going to depend on the purpose. So if it's study abroad, it can be anywhere. If it's for work, it can be anywhere. Humanitarian, probably not going to be able to make a really good, compelling argument for anywhere but Mexico for dental work because, you know, they have that medical tourism at the border.
Right.
I don't think I could, I would try it because it would be fun, but to argue that somebody needs dental work in South Korea might be hard. Okay, so for filing advanced parole, this is something that we do at our office regularly for our DACAs, but if you wanted to do it yourself, you could. The form that we use is the I-131. It is a basic, it's a form for all types of travel permission, so it can be a little tricky. The filing fee is $575. There's a specific section of the I-131 that has to be completed for advanced parole. And if somebody wanted to attempt to file the advanced parole on their own, we would be more than willing to talk to you about it and guide you through it. And even come back to Chaffey and do an advanced parole clinic. That would be cool. We would do that. I'm sure there are a lot of students here that would be interested in it. So I was in line in Mexico City to get boarding a flight, and I saw a young man in front of me with a plastic pocket that had his advanced parole document, his valid passport, his DACA card. I thought it was amazing that I got to see that. So this young man had obviously gotten permission to go to Mexico, and he was about ready to be inspected by the airline, okay, to make sure he had permission to go into the United States. So for those of you who have traveled abroad by air, you know that the airline is the first level of immigration enforcement. They won't let you get on the plane to come into the United States from any other country unless you can prove that you'll be admitted to the United States. And so watching this young man go through the process in front of me, pull out his very organized package of documents and watch the airline go through it and recognize everything was very significant. So these were the documents that he had. The DACA card, which everybody has, is the employment authorization card. I believe he had his DACA approval notice, the I-797 approval notice. I think he had a copy of it. Those approval notices, if you're going to carry them around, I would always carry a copy because a copy is perfectly acceptable as proof. And, you know, if you keep a copy, then the original is in a safe place, hopefully. Okay, so I've gone over this, but since we've had people walk in late, I'm going to just go over it again briefly. The reason why advanced parole is so important for us and so significant is that it gives people who do not have legal entries, that they did not arrive in the U.S. legally, it gives them a pathway to adjust status through an immediate relative. And I believe I saw a number that 300,000 DACAs have adjusted status using this path. So we had 1.1 million people enter the program. So that means a third of DACAs adjusted into green cards by obtaining advanced parole, obtaining a legal entry, and then filing a green card either through a U.S. citizen spouse or a U.S. citizen child over 21. Now, I had somebody call me yesterday that's a DACA who got the legal entry, and he told me, well, my employer wants to petition me. And I explained the whole process of an employer petitioning him, and then at the end, I told him, but you will have to go outside the country to an interview in Juarez. And he said, well, wait a minute, you told me that I had a legal entry so I could adjust inside the U.S. The distinction in that case is that an employer is not an immediate relative U.S. citizen petitioner. So the special rule that we're taking advantage of with advanced parole, 245A, only allows an immediate relative petitioner to allow you to adjust status if you have a legal entry and you're undocumented. And I keep saying the undocumented as a condition because with DACA, that's not a status under the law, it's a promise not to deport. It's a deferred action. It's not considered a status under the law. What is this? Okay. So what we have listed here is other ways that you guys might be interested in to obtain immigration relief. The employment-based permanent residency, that's what I was just mentioning. The young man I talked to yesterday told me his employer wanted to petition him. Well, an employer can petition somebody, but if you do not have status, it becomes difficult. We have to figure out if it's even going to work because that person would have to go out of the United States to a consular interview to be able to use that visa obtained by the employer. And in some cases it works, but we have to analyze everything. So if anybody has the potential of having an employer petitioner, I'd be more than happy to analyze the facts and see if it will work. Adjustment of status through marriage to a U.S. citizen is what we've already been talking about, like again and again, and I'll continue to talk about it because I want to make sure that everybody knows about it. Having a legal entry, either because your parents came with a visa a long time ago or through advanced parole, allows you to obtain a green card through marriage to a U.S. citizen. For people who do not have legal entries, that did not get DACA, that are married to U.S. citizens, there's still a path. But that path is long, it takes around 5 years, and it requires a waiver, and it requires an interview in Juarez. If you're a Mexican national, or Guatemala City if you're from Guatemala, you know, the problem in those cases is that you cannot obtain residence in the United States. You have to depart the country and then get a visa at your consulate. So we have quite a few people that are in this process because they did not get DACA. They don't have the option for advanced parole. It works. It's a path to a green card and later citizenship. It takes 5 years. And the prospect of leaving the country and going to a consular interview is very frightening for a lot of people. But it does work very well if it's done properly. And, you know, all the proper background checks around.
And it has to be to a citizen, not a resident alien?
A resident can do that process.
As
Yes,
well?
yes. So actually there are a lot of different categories
Okay.
that can go through family-based petition consular processing. But for the adjustment of status inside the U.S., for an undocumented person that has a legal entry, it can only be an immediate relative.
Okay.
U visas are very, very important paths for to a green card and to citizenship. The U visa was created by Congress to encourage people who are undocumented to report crimes. So the program, again, I'm going to say 15 years ago, I might be off by a few years, so any immigration nerds out there who want to tell me I'm wrong, go ahead. But anyway, the people in our communities were afraid to report domestic violence, rape, kidnapping, attempted murder, because they were afraid if they reported the crime that they were going to be deported. So Congress created the U visa to allow people who report the crimes to actually have a path to a visa. And this is probably one of the I'm going to say, for us, probably 25–30% of our practice is obtaining U visas for people who reported crimes. I'm going to say the most, significant crime is domestic violence. So victims of domestic violence, they call and report the crime. It does not matter if the police arrest or press charges against the perpetrator. It only matters that the person reported the crime and that they remained accessible for the ensuing investigation. Now, a lot of times, and this is common with any domestic violence, the victim is afraid to press charges. They have there's a word for it, but they immediately want to retract what they said because they often live with the person that's abusing them. That still doesn't matter. That's very common. The police know that. They know that it was hard for them to pick up the phone and report the crime. So a lot of people are on a path to a green card because they picked up the phone and reported the crime. Now, not every crime allows you, I'm saying that probably incorrectly. There are crimes that people can be victims of that do not allow them to get U visas. Like, for example, robbery. That is not a qualifying crime. Certain level of assault are not qualifying crimes. But felonious assault, where there's bodily injury, that is a qualifying crime. Having a bar fight is not a qualifying crime, like being the victim of a bar fight. Unless there's bodily injury. But typically, just a simple assault will not qualify a person for a U visa. What we do when we have a victim of a crime is we reach out to the law enforcement agency and we ask them to certify that the individual was the victim of the crime and the individual remained available for investigation. In California, passed a law a few years back removing discretion on that decision from the law enforcement. So that means that law enforcement must certify these, what they're called I-918Bs. I'm going to say that, it's a mouthful. But an I-918B must be certified by the law enforcement if the victim was the victim of a qualifying crime, if they remain available for the investigation. Prior to that law, the law enforcement agent had discretion to say no. And that's the way it is pretty much everywhere in the U.S. But California did not want law enforcement to have that discretion, and they removed it. So it's a state law that says that law enforcement must sign that B certification. So I've had people recently who tried to get a B certification in 2015, and law enforcement refused, that we're able to go back now and get the B certification. The problem with the U visa is their statutory limit of U visas every year. They can only grant 10,000, and they have about 100,000 pending. So our U visa cases take about 5 years. So in recognition of the wait, the Biden administration now gives work authorization to people who are waiting for the U visa, which made it an even stronger benefit for people who are the victim of crimes. They're getting work authorization about 1 year after starting the process. Asylum. One thing I hear pretty much once a week is there's no political asylum for Mexicans. That statement in itself is so loaded with incorrectness, totally wrong. Asylum has two major branches. There's political and social group asylum. Political asylum is, speaking out against the government, maybe participating in political rallies against the government. That does exist in every country in the world. But whether or not the government is after you and going to harm you for doing that, that's what leads to an asylum case. And right now we're seeing political asylum seekers from, and this is what really surprised me a couple weeks ago, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Colombia, and we've always had them, from Central American countries. But whatever's going on in South America is just a boiling pot that's about to explode. And so the asylum seekers are all usually heading towards the southern border, and that's why we have this big mess with Title 42, where now the Biden administration is preventing people from declaring asylum at the border because of COVID. And that's something we have to watch pretty much by the hour, because it changes by the hour. But anyway, so that's political asylum. Then there's social group asylum. My office has a good reputation for filing asylum for deaf individuals. We've won about 300 asylum cases for people who are deaf because of the persecution that they faced in their home countries, and the majority of our clients are from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador. That's pretty much it. I've actually been to Mexico and met with the Minister of Human Rights, who told me, yes, deaf people are persecuted here in our country, and we're trying to figure out ways to remedy that. So we went through a whole process of educating judges in Los Angeles, San Diego, even across the country, on deaf persecution. They just did not believe that it existed.
So can you explain why, as Mexicans, that doesn't make any sense? Why would deaf people be persecuted in Mexico?
Okay, how long do I have to talk? The reason is, we'll start from the big one, which is there's no enforceable act that protects the rights of the disabled. In the U.S., we have the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. That's why we have the walk ramps everywhere on campus, and the ADA compliance to get in and out of a classroom. And we require in the United States that deaf people have access to reasonable means of communication. So me as a professional, if I have a deaf person come in my office, I'm obligated under the law to provide reasonable means of communication to the deaf person. And for us, that's usually an interpreter. And lucky for me, I have an ASL interpreter in my office. But most people in Mexico do not have access to an interpreter. In our research, we found that there's one interpreter to every 15,000 deaf people. So if you're a deaf person and you've been in a car accident and you're in a hospital, there's probably not going to be anybody to tell you or explain to you what's wrong or what the doctor is going to do or give you choices about the medical care that you're going to have. That's a persecution. There's no formal deaf education curriculums because they don't have enough interpreters. That's part of it, but it's just never been formalized in the education process. Most of the people that I represent have told me that they went to school, and I thought, oh well, they do. They're getting educated. But then when we dug deeper, we found out that they were put at the front of the class and expected to read lips, and none of them ever took a test or were graded, and were just passed on each level of education. And so it was sort of like a formalized daycare. I mean, for the deaf person to attend a class, sit there, watch a teacher talk all day, and then go home. Never learned anything. The only math that my clients in this situation, there's some that are exceptions, know, or it's the type of math they need to know to count change, make change, purchase items, just practical mapping. It's a life skill. So, one of the visibilities about deaf people, like we have to prove that a particular social group is socially visible. And people who are deaf in Mexico constantly tell us that they don't sign in public. They don't use sign language because the moment they do, they're shunned or they have experiences of persecution. So, I mean, I just picked 3 off the top of my head, but there are dozens. There's sexual exploitation by family members, community members, there's the big like don't tell anybody, I'm going to rape you, I mean, it's really bad, the stuff that we've heard. And, most of those cases, I took the declarations about 10 years ago, and I'm kind of glad that we printed, I think across the United States, a lot of other attorneys have taken on the cases. I don't have to hear the stories anymore because when I was listening to those stories, it took a big impact on my mental health. And that's, an issue that we have in the immigration law firm is hearing stories that are very, mentally disturbing. And it's a lot with the asylum and also with the EU visas. And then there's another type of humanitarian green card called the VAWA. VAWA is for people who are married to U.S. citizens or green card holders who have U.S. citizen children or green card holding children who are abusive to them. And those cases can be also very difficult. But what the government has allowed is that if you're married to a U.S. citizen and you're undocumented and that U.S. citizen is abusive, then you can self-petition for a green card. And I don't know, that one's not open. Follow up periods applications. What is that?
For like,
People who have petitioned?
yes, petition.
Okay.
We can look at that one.
Do we? Okay.
There's just information about each.
Okay. I didn't talk much about the T visa, that's a trafficking visa. It happens a lot when people are brought from other countries to work here and they're pretty much put in situations where they don't have the freedom to leave that situation. Like one example is a carnival that when I was with the consulate in Mexico, we were all working on this case. There was a carnival that had brought a lot of people from Mexico on a H-1B visa, which is, I'm not sure which visa type it was. But anyway, once they got here, they took all their passports and they paid them. I don't think they were paying them, and so they were kind of held like in voluntary servitude, which is slavery. So that's a trafficking visa. Okay, so I'll just mention really quickly, I don't know that this is going to apply to anybody in the room, but another large part of our practice is removal proceedings court, where people have been put into removal proceedings for a variety of reasons, and we are defending them in front of an immigration judge. And, asking for relief to remain in the United States and also to work. And right now, post the Trump administration policies and putting people into court, the courts are backlogged significantly. I don't know what current numbers are. I think about 6 months ago there were 1 million cases in immigration courts, and I think the immigration courts have the capacity to adjudicate about 200,000. So this past year, the courts have been terminating cases, just saying, don't come anymore, we're terminating your case. And a lot of our cases in our office were terminated without relief, without removal orders, just terminated. But removal proceedings can often be a good thing because the judges have access to relief that the USCIS can't adjudicate and other agencies. So sometimes for people who, for example, parents with children, like we have a case going tomorrow in court where the parents have 2 autistic children, and we expect the judge to grant them a green card tomorrow.
But that's kind of counterintuitive. You normally wouldn't want to go to a removal
Yeah, I
city,
mean,
you would think.
well, what strategically attorneys will do is they'll declare asylum for a parent who has like in this case, two autistic children, with the end game of getting them into removal proceedings.
Okay, so
And
not
there's a
every,
risk.
not every case, like even just say everybody. let's
No.
say only, yeah, it's a
No,
strategy.
it's a strategy, yes. Okay. So this is more stuff that you know about, Marty. I think that you should talk about this.
So, as we know that they are not approving any initial DACAs at the moment, so you can't actually earn a living without having DACA. So as you guys can see here, we listed up a couple of examples of what you can do without DACA. You can be an independent contractor, professional consultant, you can create your own business, sole proprietor, partnership or corporation, as you guys can see here. So on the next one right here, there's this one, it's called #UndocuHustle, and they actually do refer to an entrepreneur's spirit at the heart of the immigrant experience. They actually show you how you can leverage your skill, knowledge, and experience to be able to move forward or make a living inside of the U.S.